So, welcome to Dark Loops. Why is this so good? A podcast in which we find something in pop culture and get together and ask ourselves, why is this so good? I'm Dr. Scott Jordan, aka Zombie Scotty, cognitive psychologist, philosopher at Illinois State University. And tonight we're getting together for our third discussion of Alice in Borderland. We did not schedule three discussions. They emerged spontaneously and contextually. And all I can say is, even if you don't like this show, we love this conversation. So that's a fantastic thing about a piece of work. So I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourself and to tell the audience a little something about what you do. And tonight we'll start with Lorraine.
Oh, you put me in the hot seat.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, I'm Lorran Garrison. I'm a school psychologist out here in beautiful, sunny San Diego, California. I am also the co-founder of a little small publishing company called Little Brainstorm. You can find us at www.com, littlebrainstorm.com. So we write social emotional learning books for teens, kids. Hey, even an adult might want to pick it up. So check us out on Amazon.
Excellent. So glad you're here. How about you, Julius?
My name is Julius or JV Francisco, whichever one is fine. I address to both, or you call me Vlad. Sometimes I go by Vladimir as well because I have so many first names. I'm the youngest member of Ray Bradbury's collective, one of them anyway. I used to do indies. And yeah, I'm just all here for the conversation. Very stimulating the brain,
Yeah, it went really to really good places last time. And I actually listened to all of it again. It was delightful. How about you, Rio?
I am Rio Shigeta. My training is in acting. My bills are paid by being in sales. I occasionally host trivia games online and also am a DM by choice and an insufferable anime nerd by nature. And I should, I think, clarify that Alice in Borderland technically counts as an anime because there was a 3-episode OVA created based on the manga.
Okay, so take a moment and explain what that means.
Okay, so an OVA, simply put, is an original video anime made not for TV, just for release, usually as a sort of special edition to a manga release or a popular manga by demand. A studio will get together and create sort of a pilot, I guess, of an anime. And so this one, based on the original story of Alice in Borderland, they created 3 episodes very close to the manga. So that's what sort of an OVA is and what that was.
And then what makes it officially qualify as an anime?
Well, it was animated. So it was,
all right. Sorry for the bad question.
moving pictures. It was I don't know how to answer that.
I gotta tell you what, Attack on Titan is close to the end. I think they got one hour bit left to release. But they have a whole bunch of OVAs that are just fantastic. It's like watching, and I may have said this before, but it's kind of like watching Rogue One in the sense the universe has been built. And now you just to go into it and do these little vignettes of what people were doing at certain times, and easy to get lost in watching that stuff. How about you, Marissa?
I'm Marissa. I'm a home visitor. So I work with families with kids 0 to 3 on child development and family bonding. Also, dude over here's daughter.
Oh.
I'm here just because I love the show, and
Cool. So there are some things we haven't discussed. We mentioned them a bit before we went on air. Does anyone want to start the conversation with one of those items?
Well, we were talking about, and I guess this is an interesting segue from OVAs, which kind of are side stories, like you said. Sometimes if there's a main anime and an OVA that features certain characters sort of as a spin-off. The manga, and I know I talk about it so much more than the show itself, but just because the show is so much more linear, it's easy to follow each of the characters. The manga has certain sort of chapters that are offshoots that are not any of the main characters, but they feature, a side character in a game, and they sort of have their own microcosm of story and philosophy. One of those characters who ends up sort of going into the main storyline is Akane Heiya. And I've read theories that her character is sort of the manifestation of the March Hare in the story. But I can't really think, other than like her name Heiya sounds like hair, and she sort of has a springy false leg, or a prosthetic rather. I guess is about as much as I can see getting close to that. And I mean, maybe we can discuss how mad she maybe is, but she's also one of my favorite characters. And we've talked a little bit about how each character sort of embodies this change, this decision that one makes in sort of accepting themselves or finding their place in society and in their life and a purpose for living. And sort of her transition from like, I'm just a good for nothing because my mother didn't value herself, she didn't value me, so I'm not worth anything, so what does it matter? And then she finds herself in Borderland and suddenly finds that like she's not ready to just give up and die. Even if she sets like very small goals for herself step by step, she basically ends up in this exploding stadium and is near death. She wakes up with a I think like a pipe or a rebar like stuck out. I think in the TV show they go right for the foot. In the manga, there's way more steps between her getting impaled and then getting her foot crushed and everything. It's a whole process, and the kids just keep coming for her. But eventually she sort of like, I don't know, she picks up her phone and starts recording herself, and she says, future me, you're welcome, this is for you. I'm doing this for you. She apologizes to all of her friends as sort of like this goodbye message, and then she's like, you know what, never mind, I decide to live because future me deserves it. My value comes from within me. And then she just goes on, and she is unstoppable from that point on.
She's also the one that she has to jump into the water, and she doesn't know if it's hot water.
Right.
So she's making a decision that from her perspective is 50-50 life or death, So it's like Usagi jumping over the trailers, right? There's this moment where this huge leap, and that leap, and it's from that leap that she suddenly starts, as you said, inch by inch, working her way into a life of living. I think that's a really good way to think about it. Anybody else want to go ahead?
Just to add one quick thing, the choices that you're talking about, they happen a lot. In her chapter. And one more thing, I'm remembering something about what Lorraine said a couple episodes ago about the superpower. I mean, talk about someone who survives not only mental, emotional, but physical trauma. Like, I think even in the show, there's no way a human could survive that much bleeding and heat and like physical trauma. Anyway, that's all I got at the moment.
I was going to jump in and say, and like, that's a great segue to what I was thinking about this character and why I really love her, in the sense that there's no shame in her sexuality and what she has to do. Because like in modern times, she would be considered a whore, right? Because she had to, like, in order to survive and to get her foot cut off because it had gangrene, she slept with that doctor. I mean, it's alluded in the show. In modern times, that would be a no-no. People would rather die. I mean, like, all of these things, which is, the human condition, like, whose ethics are we using? Like, whose values are we using? And so I really, I really admired that the writers went there with that, especially catering to a Western crowd, because in a Western sense, it's like, no, I would rather, keep my pride and die. But like she had to do what she had to do to survive, which makes me think of the comfort women, of all of these women, across the world who did what they had to do to survive. I mean, I have some terrible stories that, I'm half Vietnamese. And so my family were boat people during the Vietnam War. And they, don't always talk about it, but they have some stories that, hopefully one day I'll put in a book of some sort. But they have some incredible stories of surviving, and there's shame in that. But, sometimes I have to remind my family, like, this is how you guys came here to the United States and survive. And now you have grandkids and these generations, and yes, I mean, Americans, people here in the Western world, we don't like to talk about the trauma. We tend to wash over it. We don't want to look at the history. We don't want to look how terrible we are. I mean, that's why Florida, all of these places are trying to scrub history. And, no, we're terrible human beings. And the only way to not be so terrible and not to repeat history is to understand how terrible we can be. We talk about Nazis all the time. But what about colonialists? What about the United States? What about, Britain and things like that? But thank you that, letting me talk in my soapbox. I appreciate it. But that's why I really liked her, that character.
So as going left as we do talk about Nazis all the time. And there's I don't know what word to use, but by the 1960s, German culture was actually forcing their kids to learn about this weakness in their culture. They were teaching the Holocaust in K through 12 schools. They were teaching them not so much that we're horrible people, but we have this vulnerability in who we are and how we carry ourselves, and we need to constantly stay vigilant of it, lest it go astray. And of course, how long ago was the Civil War? And we're still struggling as to whether or not we're going to have that conversation. As a matter of fact, we're arguing now, but as you said, about whether or not to even discuss it in school, because some people get upset. So another thing, go ahead, man, go ahead.
In Germany, like, because I'm very well traveled. That's why I didn't decide to start a family, because I wanted to do that, because I know that I didn't have any means to. So that's where the bulk of my budget go. But when you go to Germany, that's the first thing you see. Like, there's some homes and it's got like the names of like the people that were taken. So there's like a constant reminder, like a physical reminder, like so-and-so person lived here. Well, that person was a victim of the Holocaust, right? So as like a regular citizen, you see that it's just like, okay, another family lives there now, but that belonged to so-and-so last name, and that guy is gone. He got gas in the chambers. He got burned, right? There's like this constant reminder. They're always facing like the shadow, which unfortunately some cultures, we're not alone in that. We don't have the monopoly on that, are not able to, so.
Well, just like propaganda will be used to get you to ignore trauma, the issue is organizing a world that gets your beliefs to fall one way or another. And German culture has chosen to do it that way. And another, dare I say, inconvenient or unfortunate aspect of the last 50, 60 years regarding German history is the Western world has found itself completely comfortable assuming evil exists in Germany, right? And if you can point to the real bad guy, then you don't have to look at yourself. And there's just been decades of course, the Holocaust was horrible. No one's trying to say or say it wasn't. No one's trying to forgive. No one's trying to legitimize. But if we want to get out of these vulnerabilities we're seeing in our own culture right now, the way to do it is to make it conscious and to put it in the world on a daily basis so that we're aware of these vulnerabilities, because they are vulnerabilities. And you're right, Julius, there are vulnerabilities in every culture, right? So,
they don't teach that the mustachioed one, a lot of his eugenics ideas, he copied directly from the movement here, the eugenic movement here, and also a lot of his financiers, like Krupp, got a lot of their from the banking from Wall Street, essentially. Like, you know, like a lot of that financed by companies over here. So they don't talk about that in our history books.
No.
Speaking of eugenics, as a school psychologist, the whole concept of IQ is based on that too. And so we do a lot of special education assessments to see where a person's IQ lands to help them in the education system. But like nobody knows the history of that as well.
Right.
So that's maybe we talk about that at some other time.
I want to explore the girl with the arrow in a sense.
Well, I'll say we started off talking about Akhenaten, and now we're, but that's what a good after dinner conversation is, right? So, but Julius, go ahead, take us back to the boat.
Because I know this is a spoiler rich zone.
Yeah, please. We assume they've seen it.
The main thing is essentially the central crux and truth of Borderland is it is the literal borderlands between life and death. It is essentially like another realm ruled by basically the boatman, like the death, seventh seal, right, kind of thing, right? And in a lot of ways, like I love how it brings to the fore these extreme characters. You were talking about the guy who's always naked. Is this Chisha? No, I forgot his name.
Kuyima.
Kuyima, which is he's the central weakness of collective societies, because it's very hard to say no to someone. This is my sister and I were just talking about this, and how like the mangaka and anime scene in Japan, they tend to be dominated by these super alpha figures. Even like the film like scene, like you got Takeshi Miike, because it's very hard for you to say no to somebody. So when you have like a super like alpha dog type of personality, like type A persona, that races to the fore, and it exposes like the weakness of a collective society, right? In this instance, the girl with the arrow, it's kind of like a different partake in that, because it's almost like she almost didn't want to belong to society just because of how hurt she was. She really wanted like a true separation from like the source, like the embracing like true like individualist like motives. She is in fact like kind of like a very libertarian type person. It's like it's the first time in her life that she really truly experienced agency, and she didn't kind of blame anyone. Everything was on her shoulder. Like she is the little Ubermensch that Nietzsche was talking about. So I like how the fact that like when death literally created this world, like where he exists, that all these kind of extreme personas like came to the fore, right? And it brings it about. It's beyond Jungian archetypes, in my opinion. It's like they are like a Jungian archetype, but there's like all inside them. They have like all these different personas inside them, right?
And all those different people types, whatever we want to call them, are all sort of embodiments of cultural borders, right? And so the Kuyima character, he's not just an independent character with his own meaning. He gains his meaning in relation to what all the other characters are. And so each of them is, in a sense, their own border. And in terms of what, in this sense, I would say what Japanese culture is, what its values, and how those contradictions move back and forth between people and shape how the culture works. So yeah, we weren't even talking about stuff like that last week. So man, we just keep digging it up, right? It's
I think like a better like way to describe it's not so much like Jungian archetype, but it's almost like the Aeonid, like kind of like that thing that you draw with the 9 when you create like when you try to create a book, and then you draw those lines, and it's like a circle, and then it's like the Aeonid, right? I think that's like a better descriptor. I find that her character so fascinating, because she's like the ultimate liberated, not only woman, but like liberated person.
This sort of is tangential to what we're talking about, but I think it still follows. We were talking about how this is a borderland, and all of these people are sort of in this NDE essentially. And I was looking at and thinking about the Joker, the existence of the Joker you're talking about, the border person, the guide, the boatman, whatever we're going to get into eventually, I think. But I was looking at and reading a little bit about the series that followed this, which is Alice on Border Road. And in the two, there was sort of an explanation that talked about how this is the world. Borderland is a collective manifestation of the people who are in it rather than its own entity.
I like that.
And I thought that was interesting because it's not happening to them. They're actually making it, creating it and making it happen.
So it's Joseph Campbell's worst nightmare. Well, that's what you're trying to say.
All characters have agency.
You take Rick and Morty and you throw Joseph Campbell in there, and you're like, "Good luck, see you later."
Yeah.
So it's like the primal heart in Kentaro Miura's Berserk, though. It's essentially it's manifested by the human psyche. Yeah.
And I really like that because then the borders are all emerging from the lived character of the characters. And not to get too philosophical, but I think that's actually the most coherent way to look at reality, is all borders emerging spontaneously out of what things are individually in relation to reality as a whole. And for example, mass, and I'll stop lecturing after this, mass is supposed to be an intrinsic property that belongs to a particle in and of itself. Yet the only way that we can explain mass anymore is to argue that particles get it because they move through something called the Higgs field. What is that? It's a field that permeates all of reality, yo. So it's not an intrinsic property. It's a grounded property. It's a relative property. And we can't even find one thing in reality that is what it is, all because of itself. And we talked, when we started talking about this show, I started talking about, we have two choices about talking reality. We can talk about it as things that are in motion, or we can talk about it as flux. And then we have to ask, how does stability ever come to be? And this show, the thing you talked about the borders of Borderland emerging out of the work of the systems that are there, that's a view of reality as flux, with borders emerging and stabilities emerging out of the systems that are in relation. All right, I'm going to stop with all that, but y'all brought it up and I couldn't stop. And these things are really in my mind these days for certain reasons. It's
fascinating because, then what is psychosis?
Snap.
Yes. Right? What is psychosis?
Yep. Go ahead.
I was just thinking about how I've had family members and friends who actually have had psychosis, and I've been on the other line of that phone call of the psychosis.
Yeah.
And, whatever they're thinking and feeling at that moment, it is real. I've worked with students who have curtains talking to them, and I've witnessed that. And that is their reality right then and there. And that's why I was hooked, line and sinker in the finale of season 2. I was like, okay, this all
actually went there.
Makes sense. Yes. And I loved it. That's what I love. That's the hook and sinker for me.
When Hoffman came and had his famous bicycle ride to infinity, when lysergic acid diethylamide first came through, and Sandoz started to give it out to the different, psychiatric facilities all throughout Switzerland. Their main goal, along with Stanislav Graf, that generation, was initially to find a chemical basis for psychosis, because they were thinking if we can replicate some type of chemical exogenous dump into some other body, maybe we can tie down the reason why people have schizophrenic breaks.
Yeah.
And unfortunately that proved not, that's not that wasn't reality, that it didn't come from that. But it's interesting that you bring that up.
Well,
but
the data
kind of exactly what
go
happened?
Go ahead.
I was just saying in the final game in the Tea Party that it was a drug-induced psychosis. What was her name? Mira against Alice's character with the tea. That's what happened.
No.
Yeah, but that's in the manga, right? Because
I think that it's inferred or implied in the show as well that she drugs the tea, and that's what induces his psychosis and thinking that this is psychosis. It's sort of flipped around.
I gotta watch that again, because that's not what I took. When I watched it the first time, I thought the show did it brilliantly in the sense that in the manga, it was definitive that she drugged the tea. And then his girlfriend is just like, what did you do? Like, you put something that, and he's like trapped in this, like, kind of loop, right? In the TV show, what I interpreted was like, she was doing that to him just by the nuance of the things that she said.
Yeah, she was gaslighting him over and over and over.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And the whole, the drug thing, I mean, the drug thing does help because he does go through these different realities as she's doing that. And just a quick thing on borders, schizophrenia, the psychosis, schizophrenia, from a neuro perspective, these are brains that don't generate the types of borders that that non-diagnosed brains generate. Notice I'm very careful in my language because I don't like to say disorder. I don't like to say we have no idea what contribution people with those types of systems have contributed to culture over culture's history. The Western world tries to tell us they're a problem. They've got mental health issues. In Hopi culture, 20% of kids are diagnosed as ADHD or ADD because in Hopi culture, they actually cultivate some of the principles that you see at work in ADD. So it's all about how your culture interacts with this type of system you are and how you all interact together. So I stay away from concepts like mental health and disorder. And that's just personal. That's a philosophical choice. That's not me being political or anything.
I'm with you, Scott. I mean, because the Western civilization is based on Eleusis. I mean, we can argue about that all the time about like Plato and Socrates. They talk about that. They talk like what the most important thing that happened in their life is the Eleusinian mysteries. So that is an altered state of consciousness.
Yes.
In indigenous culture, whether it's like, Native American or Filipino, I'm not going to talk for them, but what, I've learned and studied is that a lot of the shamans, when they do their walkabout, that some people liken that to what us Westerners call as psychosis.
Yes.
When we're talking to the trees, when we're talking, those things. And so I'm seeing where you're coming from. I mean, I'm still learning about it, but I see that now. I can appreciate how cultures interpret what we Westerners considered as mental health disorders.
I mean, that if we're going to go into the world of helping people in the United States, there's a DSM. We all learn it, right? That's a system. One more bit of sciencey stuff. I saw a fantastic talk. They measured the brain, the energy signature of the brain in people that were tripping, people that were expert meditators, and people that were neither, what we would call normals, right? And they found that the energy signature of the tripping brain and the expert meditator were higher than normal and the same. In other words, what the expert meditator has learned to do is allow brain organizations to emerge in the moment that don't emerge in daily life because we're so forced to focus. So in a lot of meditation practices, you focus, and then you release. And that creates a different kind of neural structure that you can't just spontaneously generate in daily life because you're looking there, answering this, doing that. So the idea that that's a therapeutic thing, I mean, microdosing is everywhere now, right? And there's a whole world out there. This is the second time we've started talking about these kind of things. But...
I want to ask Marissa about that because you're a Gen Z, right?
Unfortunately.
Tell us about that. About like
microdosing.
Yeah. Because the thing is, like, I'm a millennial, and that kind of came later. That's more of like a Gen Z type of like movement.
Yeah, I mean, I have no experience, but I can tell you the general like concept. Basically, what it is you're taking small amounts of hallucinogens to kind of numb your like kind of daily life. So you're in this kind of constant state of like high, but it's not enough to influence your day-to-day kind of lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
It also is there to like help your wow, I can't think today, I'm sorry. It's there to like influence how it affects you when you take a whole bunch of it. So like you're basically making yourself kind of immune. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I read a fascinating paper that puts autism and schizophrenia on two ends of a neural inhibition continuum. So people that end up being in what we call autism end of that spectrum have brains that are hyper inhibited. In other words, the only reason we can see or say anything is because massive amounts of neural inhibitions going on, so we can sculpt a pattern out of our brain. Whereas so people diagnosed on the spectrum tend to have brains that are very, very focused, very hard to get them out of a certain state of inhibition, while people that are more at the psychotic end actually don't have that kind of inhibition. As I said earlier, they can't create those borders. So they have thoughts, but they can't tell if they're creating them or the world's putting them in their head. And I just thought, LSD is something that in fact influences that level of inhibition and allows sounds and taste to interact with each other in ways that they normally are kept apart in daily life. Yeah, so there's something to be said for tripping.
It's used a lot for like understimulated folks too. People that are like understimulated on a daily basis. Those kind of drugs can help you like actually feel those kind of senses. So what you're talking about like your senses being like hyper focused on stuff, sometimes they don't get that and are constantly searching for stimulation. So that can kind of help too. It can be very overwhelming because it's just like thrown at you all at once. But I have heard that being something that's used as well.
Well, there you go. Julius, I can't hear you, man.
Based on our conversation, like prior to this talk, you wanted to bring up the wounded commando, right? Essentially, he's like the wounded Rambo.
You mean Agony?
Yeah, because that was the most lethal game in the entire.
The King of Spades, right? Yeah, so we can talk about the King of Spades. I'll throw a little something out there and then we'll go from there. I almost saw the King of Spades as the inevitability of death. He's walking around and he's killing individuals, and it was like there's no way to escape him unless you confront him. So the only people that survive him are the ones that confront him directly and take him on, and everybody else dies. So that's the vibe. That's the only way I can make sense of a dude walking around with a machine gun.
Yeah, that was like my least favorite game because it made no sense. Like, excuse me.
Well,
and the fact that nobody dies, we talked about that last time. Like, that bothered the absolute crap out of me because everything made sense until people decided to stand like point blank in front of a machine gun and didn't die. That's insane.
So that's not inconsistent with this idea of confronting, right? Because like, man, he just shoots the hell out of some of those characters that fought him in the alley, right? And they don't die. And they don't die because they're confronting the inevitability of death head on. That's so, these superpowers we've talked about, these are things that I think just kind of emerged in as, narrative amplifications. And it only made sense to me when I thought that confronting him was the only way to survive him.
He's definitely like the final boss.
Everybody that ran from him died.
True.
Yeah.
Everybody that ran from him that died. So that's the only sense I've been able to make of him. And then
how about the acid game with Chisha?
Oh, okay. So we're gonna do the King of Diamonds.
We're moving right along.
Someone else going to King of Diamonds. I love it.
But before we do, as far as like his motivation, the King of Diamonds, according to him, as he's written, he's mercy killing everyone.
You mean King of Spades?
The King of Spades.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, gotcha.
Still on that. Because of the pain of life and living in this borderland. His concept is that death is inevitable, but life is pain.
Yes.
And so he confronts and chases down everyone as a merciful end to their time in Borderland.
Yes.
Just as a sort of conflict, I think.
I love it because they're the only ones that survive and are the ones willing to suffer the pain of being alive, right? I mean,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
How did he die? I forget.
They blew him up. They did the whole aerosol thing.
Yeah.
No, the guy shot him. That's right.
Yeah. In a mercy killing, so to speak.
No, exactly.
Remember?
And you're right, because we did see that cycle play out with him and another character. Again, that's just another great example of this idea of borders, right? You think a border is clear, and then it's a contradiction. And heat from life is pain, so end it. I don't want to end it. I'm going to suffer pain. And the only way to continue suffering the pain of life is to risk death. I don't know, just great contradictions. I loved it.
But moving on to the King of Diamonds.
To the King of Diamonds.
So that game, I guess I'll give you a little bit of background. The game is what can be referred to, I guess, as a Keynesian beauty contest, meaning that's more of a financial and economical concept of trying to guess what everyone else will vote for rather than what you believe to be the best. So in the beauty contest, it was, whoever votes for the winner of the contest gets the prize. But that means you don't vote for who you think is beautiful. You vote for who you think the most people will vote for as beautiful. And so in the game, in the show, I don't think they even bring that up at all. It's all just numbers. And I mean, in stocks and trading, this is the same concept of you want to anticipate what the market will do rather than what you think is the most astute choice. But then what I like about how this game turns out is it's sort of, again, it goes back to the heart game, the 10 of hearts. It flips it on its head at the end, and you can't believe it. It's cognitively dissonant to think, why would someone give up their own life for their belief? There's no way. Why would you do that? Why would you have such a deep held belief that you would let this guy who was a stranger until a few weeks ago live on instead of yourself? It just doesn't make any sense, except conceptually. In that his entire mission was to ascertain the value of life. His background as a lawyer and as he started out, I think, defending individuals and ended up as a corporate international lawyer who then saw that life and finance are not in balance, and he had to make choices that he didn't like and ultimately be told that, well, it's for the greater good. We as corporations uphold the country such that people are allowed to live. So the individual is not greater than the capitalist collective. And finally, his decision is that, let me remember this. In the manga, he doesn't decide. He pushes both buttons, 0 and 100. He backs out of the decision. But I believe in the show, he makes the decision to allow Shigeta to live. Yeah.
I hearing you talk about that game, and in the show, he was all about fairness because it was so violently violated by the relationship between numbers and individual choices of the people those numbers represented, and the wickedness. Yet the beauty of this game is everybody made their own choice. Everybody had to choose. And as you said, they're choosing what they think everybody else might choose. And in the end, I mean, when I watched it the second time, it was just friggin' amazing. She says, here's my score, dude. You make the choice. And I still don't know that I've completely processed the Ubermeinung, right? The total meaning of that moment. But it's just beautiful because the guy chooses to let the other agent go on. As if as if he maybe, I got the impression that his search for something called fair actually reduced to choice, which has nothing to do with fairness, right?
Yeah.
And I think there was it's like, oh shit, my whole worldview just collapsed. Because he says, I wish I could have met you earlier in my life, right? I think that would have been good for me. And I think, yeah, he learning that the world works through human choice as opposed to some abstract concept called fairness. I'm not going to say that's what it meant, but that's the vibe I got of it. And
Chisha in the manga was essentially, if you read between the lines, he was crushed by that game internally. Because the thing is, he doesn't really have like an internal compass.
Well, his belief is the complete opposite, whereas the King of Diamonds was trying to find the exact value of life. Chishia's whole idea is that he can't find any value in life.
Yeah.
He doesn't.
Yeah, so he felt jealous of him in the manga. Like he said like I wish I had something like. He doesn't have an internal barometer of anything.
I think he actually said something like that in the show too.
I think he did. Yeah.
Because he's the guy who's the doctor who had to keep giving organs to people with money moving up in the line. So he's been in a world where he's had nothing. He's seen it. It's nothing but human will. He's in a Nietzsche world where people with power are running the show, making the choices. And so I would argue faith in that world.
I would argue he might be even deeper than that. I think he's in the George Bataille type of world. He's in the Hellraiser type of world. Like an MC Escher type of world, you know what I mean?
That could be, yeah.
I think he's even darker than Nietzsche.
It's almost, now see, you guys got us talking about this. It's almost as these two guys came to a different understanding about the nature of choice, because he comes from a world of power, and people who can have the power just make the choice to use it. It's just what they do, and so that can drive you to nihilism, right? It's just blatant power. And the lawyer came to the issue on choice from a different direction in terms of quantifying, I don't know, as you said, the value of life. And in the end, it was kind of chess. It was I guess, a bit of a chess match, and the lawyer got outdone, I think. I'm babbling.
Can I put my 2 cents in this?
You can put your 20 cents in there. Go ahead.
Okay. So one, I thought him giving up at the end was weird for a face card game, because one, he's a corporate lawyer. Are they going to give up? No. I think it was a very American ending of like, oh, you taught me everything, you're better, let me stop. Like, so that was really weird to me, especially because if you look at all the other face card games, like they were in it to the death, and this dude was like, nah, I'm good, like you won. And I thought that was weird, especially because this was like a big I'm smarter than you mind game kind of thing, and I expected more ego from this lawyer.
Can I throw my 2 cents in?
Throw your whole dollar in there. Go ahead.
All right, I'm going to throw my whole dollar in. Well, speaking of power and not feeling the power, so look at, I mean, like Shishia's doctor, we have attorney. Those are both powerful positions. So was Shishia saying, I give up the power, I'm going to let you win? He was he was allowing or giving the power to the attorney when he didn't want the power. He wanted things to be equitable and fair. Yeah. So I think for the attorney, having that burden again, like maybe, I don't know, maybe made him think about, well, you know, life isn't fair. and life is just about power,
Yes.
and it's all an illusion. So maybe, you know, he became the nihilist, you know, as opposed to Shishia. And it makes me think about like luxury goods, like the reason why Louis Vuitton and all these, you know, luxury goods, it's not because it's good quality. It's what people believe that it's good quality, right? That's
Right.
why people pay $8,000 for a tiny little handbag. So it's
Yeah.
that same concept.
So others will see it.
We
Yeah,
assign
how
value.
others, yeah, how we it reassign value. Exactly.
Yeah. I
Interesting.
think that ultimately Chishia forces the choice onto
Yeah.
Right.
him, the King of Diamonds, the value of a life. You have to choose now whether your life or my life
Yep.
is more important.
And that
Right.
completely violates any notions of fairness.
Yeah. So in the I actually like the manga ending more, because the thing is his manga choice was a non-choice.
I
He
agree.
didn't
He didn't.
choose.
He didn't choose.
That
he
makes
didn't
more
choose.
sense to me.
Yeah. He didn't. choose.
Because I honestly think the TV show ended that way to resolve Chishia. It had nothing to do with the lawyer. It was just trying to make us resolve a character's like internal struggle, which is cool. Like I feel like it was necessary for him, but
Yeah, I
I
think
feel
you're
like
right.
it was just a weird person to go up against to have him resolve that, because I don't think that would play out that way.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I
What?
agree. I think the manga ending makes more sense of him being like, okay, if you're gonna do that, then I'm gonna make you also have that decision. So he doesn't have to, because it was weird to me, but I may be thinking too much about it, but it was a weird ending to me.
It was a clash of two titanic worldviews, and when I was reading the manga, and I didn't interpret it as like him giving up, because his answer was a non-answer. To me, I interpreted that as like him staying true to who he was all the way to like the bitter end, all the way to till death. Basically, it's like, this is what I stand for. I can't assign value when it comes to life. I'm sorry. I'm basically it was just like, oh, what's it called? Rage quit, right?
Rage.
Yeah.
Like he threw the Uno cards in the game table.
Right.
He said, "Not my
Put it up.
problem."
It's like, that's not my problem. Like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna stick with what I have, like this kind of worldview I've had. That
I think that makes more sense, because
I agree
feel like
yeah.
it has more of an ego. It also has more of a like. I feel like that respects a life more. Like, because then he's only taking his own life into account. It's not like I decide that your life is more than me. It was just like, I don't want to decide. Like, I think that makes more sense in my head.
Yeah, that would have been a better ending if they had stuck to the manga totally, because that's I felt that way too, Marissa. I was like, that's a load of BS.
Yeah, I was like, he's not gonna give up like that. Like, what?
No,
showrunners, you heard it from us. You heard it here.
Right.
He tossed the table in a D&D game.
Yes, exactly.
He rage quit.
All the minis flew across the table.
Yeah,
See,
got hit in the eye with the D20.
Yeah.
I really like what Lorraine said about nihilism earlier, though, because that's also the game where, Chitsuya starts to understand choice a little differently, right? In other words, he's been fairly nihilist and cynical about it. He's been getting through because of his intelligence. And then he sees his life has been saved by choice. His life has been saved by power. And how do we talk about power without being cynical and nihilist, right? And he didn't want that power. He wanted it to be fair. I'll give you that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that is one of the central challenges of our time is, how do we live in a world of power and not hate it? Right? How do we deal with the fact that the villain, the human choice, making things happen is what makes things happen, not abstract concepts intervening in our lives. And we can share abstract concepts and persuade each other to try to function that way. But sometimes, I'll stop there. I thought there was a nice shift in nihilism at the intersection of one choice. And
Let's talk
did
about the
mark a
gesture.
change
Let's talk about the
for
gesture.
him.
all right, so we've got Julius here to
You
keep us
just
going
game
and moving
jumping,
on.
huh?
All right, well, why don't we kind of make that our closing discussion then, right? The jester card. So let's just do this. Let's just briefly have everybody give their initial impressions of what they thought that card meant or why it was shown.
I mean, I'll start with the probably most shallow interpretation that I had initially, which was the first watch through of the show. I'm like, they're teasing a new season.
Yeah.
Just because it connected the real world with Borderland again. It showed us a concrete object in the world brought from Borderland into reality. And so, okay, well, as long as the Joker's alive, then we're just gonna have another game. We're gonna repeat this again. Other people are gonna have near-death experiences, and we're just kind of gonna see what's gonna happen, which I may not have been that far off, because like I said, the spin-off it exists, one with a whole source manga. So I mean, I don't know. I haven't heard any rumors, but it could happen.
I would be excited if they did more about the citizens who stay there and what that means, because I don't like that. I still don't understand that. Like, because it ended, because I also thought there'd be another season, because I felt too like unresolved. Like, who are these like supposed game makers? Like, what are they? Who are the citizens that are staying there, and like, what does that even mean? And I know a lot of that was like, well, you figure it out, like interpret whatever you want to interpret out of it. But I would be into them kind of exploring that, even if it was just like, I don't know, like an extra episode. I'd be fine.
Yeah.
I also kind of saw that Joker card as like a giant FU for that reason of like, nah, you guys thought there'd be another season. Psych. Like, I kind of saw it as that too, because I was like, that was mean. Like, when I saw it, I was immediately like text bombing my group chat. Like, what the heck? Why would they do that to me? Like, I was so mad. But yeah, that's kind of what I interpreted.
My interpretation of it was that life's kind of a joke, and life is like how you kind of interpret it, whether it might be horrible, whether, I mean, you know, as we were talking about the break-in psychosis, right? Well, what if it's, you know, just silly and stupid and, you know, whatever you make of it, and maybe that's not the reality.
Much ado about nothing, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
You know, or waiting for Godot.
Yeah,
you know, we're waiting for nothing. You know, make life for what it is right now. And you know, I felt like it was like a very Japanese ending in that sense. You know, appreciate now and today and who you have, and you know, make that move. You know, you see a cute girl, make that move.
Live now.
Live now.
That
was my that was my interpretation.
How about you, Julius?
The same time, I had a half and half interpretation of it. I thought they were ballsy in a sense that they didn't go for the manga interpretation, because the thing is, I was thinking they're ballsy in the sense that they didn't want to explain it to everyone. Because in the manga, the explanation was very definite. Right when the queen dies, basically this godlike entity appears, and it was very telling, the sentence that it says. It said, do you think I am the god, or the god, right? Or do you think I'm the devil? And then because our main character, Arisu, is so smart, he understood right away. He's like, neither. And then in the next panel, you have like a woodblock cut in the Japanese style painting, and we see that it's Chiron the boatman. It's the literal death, right? And the Borderlands is the in between like the living and the dead. and he devised that game essentially because of the asteroid strike. And basically, whoever progresses to that game is the people that get to go back. They get to live, right? The ones that didn't make it are the ones that died, right? And I thought it was really ballsy so it's both like kind of like really cheap and like cowardly, because so I'll explain why that's my position. Very ballsy because the thing is, in the manga, it was explained for you, period.
Right.
In the show, like you had to kind of put things together. Like you're like, what?
Yeah.
What? He's like the jester, like, like the jester, right? And then like it's kind of not non-ballsy and cheap at the same time, because like, so in one sense, the ending was very Inception-y, right?
Yes.
Very first Matrix movie. And then on the other sense, I think unfortunately that's when the Keynesian in them kicked in, and they're thinking as a mega Zaibatsu, a super Zaibatsu, because they want to make money, and they're gonna do like a third season. So same time, I was like, oh, why you gotta do it like that? Like, you know what I mean? Like, why didn't you just do it like they did half and half? So I kind of felt cheapened out. At the same time, I admire them because they didn't explain it to people.
Not at all. Yeah. See, I went back because I haven't read the manga, but when I saw that final scene, I instantly went online and looked to see what it may have looked like in the manga. And there is a shadowy character there and I thought, oh. And I got to tell you, for me, that kind of took it down a little poetically, because I thought, I didn't make the connection Rio did about it being the first card we see in the non-Borderland. Yet at the same time, I love the idea as it connects with Lorraine's notion of it's a joke. I would just call it chaos, right? And as a systems theorist and person who believes that stability emerges out of flux, y'all, this is a beautiful, ugly mess from top to bottom. And you guys make it beautiful. You guys make it a mess. It's yours to do with as you will. And go ahead, man.
Sorry. I want to compare it to when it comes to like the history of creative fiction, or moving pictures with sound as like interpretations of death that we have seen. Because we've seen like, Meet Joe Black. We've seen the famous Twilight Zone episode with Gladys Cooper, Nothing in the Dark, where Robert Redford, that's his first like TV scene essentially, where he plays death, right? And we see like Seventh Seal, right? That was kind of a very that was a very different interpretation of like death as like a character, because like it showed that like in at least in that universe, in like the Alice in Borderland universe, there's like a hierarchy. So there's clearly our base realities, like where we live in. There's the place that we are gonna go to, right? And we didn't know that there was like this kind of in between, not a purgatory per se, but like kind of like the Borderland, right? And I thought that was just so smart of like also to create it that way, because normally like when we think of the depiction of death, it's always interpreted either death is already like sent you to that other place, or your interaction with death was like in our realm. We've never really like been with him like on that other place, because even like in like a Western literary tradition, when we think of like Dante's Inferno, he wasn't quite there yet. That's like that's like I guess like the only like that one we were seeing like death or like the boatman in like hell, and we see it in paradise. They were in that other place already. Like I also made that story as like this is his universe. This is like Death's universe. And I found that like very creative, very ballsy, and very, very brave.
Death's universe is kind of cool.
Death's universe.
that whole like aspect of, because like obviously in like Christianity there's like heaven and hell, right? But the idea that death doesn't live in our realm, and like you go into like another place and you meet death and then you go wherever you go, I think that's kind of cool. I've never thought about it like that.
You all need to watch Sandman, the Neil Gaiman, or read the comic book.
Yeah,
because
Neil Gaiman.
Death is my favorite character in Neil Gaiman's Sandman. But another story.
And the death in Sandman is purposely a contradiction with Western notions of death, right? And I keep going back to that Seven of Hearts game, because in that Seven of Hearts game, they took you through the last 20 minutes of these people's lives. and you saw how their commitments to their own lives and those of others changed as they got closer to death. I've never seen anything like that on the screen before. And so what does death mean? Guys, I don't know that they went anywhere else. In other words, Julius, you said they go to the borderland or they go back, and that just may be it. Right? In other words, you're alive or you're in Borderland. I don't see.
Are you alive or are you Borderland?
Right.
It was very distinctly Eastern in their like interpretation, because like in the story, like also in both the manga and the show, they don't remember their time. So basically their memory is erased. It's wiped. So that's kind of like a very like Vedantic and Buddhist, Buddhist Vedantic view of the afterlife, in a sense that like when you die, you don't get to remember, like when you come back, you don't remember like your previous lives. Like the goal in order to become an enlightened being is to remember your past mistakes and learn from them. And like in the show, it was very faithful to the manga ending and adaptation, other than we don't know for sure that was death, because that was very definitive in the manga. But like even like when they walk out of the hospital, because we're thinking like, man, they don't really know each other. Like Arisu doesn't really know his girlfriend. And then like when they walk out, like which was like kind of a cell by cell recreation of how it was, there was hope. There was that thing that you're talking about. Yeah. Right. So I don't know. I just think Aso, he's like there with Arakawa, he's there with Miura. When it comes to like the history of like mangaka in Japan, he's like up there, like, and the way that he drew the panels when Arisu first goes into Borderland and when he comes out in a kind of very Escher, and he was kind of like a wooden doll kind of thing. I was like, this guy clearly knows, because like only people that have been in that other realm of like the Chrysalis Chrysanthemum of that been into the Deems, how he drew it, like you don't do like research that through like the internet, like back when he was drawing it. Like he's been there, like, you know what I mean? So if I do want to be able to talk to him,
there you go.
I mean, he's not that old. He's born in 1980. And actually, I mean, comparatively, and not to just outright disagree, I wouldn't say that he's that prolific. I think he's created a very intriguing series. This is by far his best work, at least as far as I've seen. But what I have found is that he's kind of a fun and weird guy. He travels a lot, all around Japan as well as internationally. He was actually on a honeymoon in Jordan when the manga came out. He has this blog where he just talks about his travels. He also once cut off all of his hair that had grown out like a foot and a half and created a wig out of it for no apparent reason. Just kind of a weird dude. And I mean, a creative definitely through and through, but a traveler definitely as well. And so I can definitely see how he might have been exposed to that sort of experimental mind space in whatever context that might have been. But in terms sort of connecting that back to what we're talking about with the Joker and the existence of that, like we're saying in the manga, the Joker, it's very clear who or what he is, more or less. I mean, I don't know if he is death manifest exactly. What Arisu says is that he's a middle manager, basically. Oh, you're kind of the middle guy, middleman. So clearly saying that there is something else beyond, something greater, something more powerful that has a wider domain that rules over not only this, the playground of death, but also our life. And then going back to sort of the show's interpretation with the card, and JV, you brought up Inception, and if you think about the ending of that film, how the top keeps spinning, I feel like you could interpret the Joker card being there as the same thing.
Yep.
In that you're out of death's game, but now you're in life's game.
No.
It's just another game that
No.
we're in, different rules. Here you are again. See
Yep.
how you get out of this one. We don't know what's beyond that, but
And dare I
Nice.
quote Kuvia, never forget you're in a death match. Right? Never forget you're in a death match. No
should
matter
we end the
which-
episode with that? Never
You're
forget
those-
you're in a
I
death
do have a
match.
quick question about the Joker though, because in the manga, does he meet this shadowy figure in Borderland, or does he
in
meet
Borderland.
so
Yeah.
that's the point. This in the TV show, we see the Joker in our world.
Yeah,
So it
we
is
do.
dramatic. It's narratively a different
Mhm.
kind of thing. And I kind of like the spin you put on it. One last nerd thing I got to tell you guys. My most recent paper is called Wild Borders. And I just realized that as we're talking here, because everything we've said here is a border. It's a bubble of thought, another bubble of thought, another bubble of thought. And the curse of those bubbles is we think they point to something beyond them, right? We think that we're getting to the non-bubble space. And I think this show does a really good job of showing us that we collectively create a wonderful bubble that we all try to survive in. All right. Well, guys, this has been a fantastic conversation. I'm going to go around the horn here and ask each of you to tell everybody where they can find you on social media if you are so inclined. And we'll start with Marissa.
Well, my answer's the same as last time. I still don't got nothing from you. Maybe one day.
Maybe one day. How about you, Rio?
You can find me probably on Instagram or Twitter at I know Rio. I believe I still have a Facebook account there as well. Friend me, follow me. I don't know. Find me in real life. That is my new game. Please don't. I'm a homebody. I don't want to meet new people.
There you go.
I mean, let's be friends. I mean, no. That's all I got.
Exactly. How about you, Julius?
www.youtube.com//Karasu. Also, like, I'm on IMDb for Present Light, and that's one of the
You
movies I
are?
worked on a decade ago that I have not finished, and I finally have, and then so I will send that to the festival circuit soon. So
Good for you,
whoa.
man.
make sure
Congratulations.
it's a story about a chronovisor, because I always found odd that we always in creative fiction always talking about like time travel into like the past and the future, but like that to me is kind of mute. Like, how about something more simple, like a device that can look back into time, basically the all-seeing eye, essentially. So it's that's what the story is
Cool.
about. I look forward to watching it.
One quick comment for Julius. My first answer to what I thought the Joker was, I was going to say the proto-molecule, but then I would have to explain what all of that meant, so I left it behind, but I know you'd like that. Lorraine, how about you?
Hello. Once again, my name is Lorran Garrison. I'm a school psychologist out here in sunny San Diego, California. You can find me at littlebrainstorm.com or on Amazon with my name, Lorran Garrison. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. This has been interesting.
This has been fantastic. And you know what I love about this is these things are on YouTube until those servers break down. So you have no idea how long this is here, but it is there in the public record. That's kind of the vibe. You can find all episodes of Why Is This So Good at the Dark Loops Productions channel on YouTube. You can also type Dark Loops Productions into the Google machine and find where all the podcasts of these conversations can be found. Thanks to my guests once again for joining me. This has been a fantastic conversation. This is the first time a Why Is This So Good conversation has gone onto not 2, but 3 conversations. So very much appreciated. So there it is from all of us to all of you. Big hugs. And remember, hope survives.
Hope prevails.
Oh, shit. Let's do that
Oh,
again.
bro, your
That's
own
good.
catchline you don't
Your
remember.
own catchline.
Please.
So there it is
You
from all of
have
us
done
to all of you. Big hugs. And remember, hope prevails.
Hope
Hope
prevails.
Hope
And never
prevails.
forget you're in a death match.
Get 'em.
Straight
Death
up.
match.
Straight up.